Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Casual Sports Podcast. That's right, everyone's favorite is back, Alec Cabrera. Oh, Mike's also here as well. Matt's not, so you're welcome. I'm back. Matt's gone. Everything is right in the world.
I'm not commenting. I'm just gonna say
I had to get at least some dig in here. I've been gone a week. I'm sure it's been thrown back at me.
Oh, there's gonna be more throughout the show from you because you were off for a week. But
oh yeah, I got to catch up. So
you got a list of digs to get in.
Oh man, I was just on a long vacation. Felt so good, away from everything. Basically no internet. Barely had any technology. Luckily, had indoor plumbing. Love indoor plumbing. Never get rid of it. Greatest invention of all time.
Hey, you're living like old school. You're living like the Amish. You got no internet, no TVs, no nothing.
Oh yeah, but yeah, it was great. I went fishing. I was on a boat. I played with fire. I got to use my big knife finally. I've had it for like 4 years, never used it. I was feeling great. Great vacation. Growing the beard out now, you know.
Fishing, playing in the wilderness, that's American, man.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't have been any more this past weekend.
Yep. Love it.
But in the meantime, though, I've completely lost everything out of sports, so...
Well, yeah, with no internet, you had no access.
Yeah, Mike, you got to fill me in a little bit here and, you know, catch these viewers up. What's been going on in the sports
All right, well,
world?
so when Monday I was on by myself, then Matt was on yesterday. I kind of had him because Monday I was talking about, I started off with the Stanley Cup final recap because that was Sunday night, and then we talked about the draft. So if you want to comment on that stuff, we could do that, and then we get into stuff if you want to, if you got anything.
Yeah, you know, I'll throw a little bit out here with the draft because I kind of talked about it a little bit, I think, on the Wednesday before last time I was on the show, what I thought was going to happen, the entire first round. And I wasn't really surprised by, I think, those top three picks. Well, I guess I was a little with Paolo Banchero going number one overall. I didn't think he was going to, mainly just because of his medical problem that he has. I thought NBA teams might have been a little bit wary to go on that route because of that, because we saw a number one pick a couple years ago in Zion, you know, had a knee injury or had leg injuries in college, translated immediately. Michael Porter Jr., who fell in the draft because of back injuries down at Mizzou, still has injuries here in the NBA. So I was a little concerned that, you know, teams might get a little wary because of Paolo Banchero. I mean, he's done just fine. He's managed it perfectly. And NBA trainers are going to be able to work with him so much better than even college. So you're not overly concerned. But at the same time, to see Paolo Banchero go number one, I think a little bit of surprise because I did think Jabari Smith did fit what the Magic were doing. I think Jabari Smith and Paolo Banchero pretty much, I don't want to say same player, but similar. They could both bring similar things to the team. So I think the flip there, I knew the Thunder were going Chet Holmgren. Yeah. That was just, you know, no question there. They're going to put him next to Pokusevski, and they're going to go big, and I love to see it. I like what they're doing. Kings taking Keegan Murray with that number 4 spot. I like the scoring that they brought in there. I mean, he's a guy at Iowa that just does everything for you, and I loved it. Pistons, Jaden Ivey, you're not putting him on that very athletic young team, go along with Sadiq Bey. Those two young guards are going to light things up. Love that pick. Pacers taking Benedict Mathurin. I think that's a great player to start building around and bring something back because they're pretty much rebuild mode, I think, at this point. Clearing house this past year or so. I mean, still trying to compete, but not really having any competitive pieces out there, especially with the move of Sabonis and LeVert. Clearly rebuild mode. I like building it around a point guard and Benedict Mathurin. Shaedon Sharpe to the Blazers. I like that. You need to put someone who can score next to Dame. Dyson Daniels to the Pelicans. A 6'11" point guard. We haven't seen that since Magic. I want to see him turn out. Magic was only 6'9" doing it. This guy's got an extra 2 inches out there, and he's got time in the G League. That should be fun to see. I mean, considering the fact that their point guard might be the tallest guy on the floor now.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they got Hernan Gomez, but when they put Jackson Hayes at the 5, Zion at the 4, and then, you know, 3 and 2 and 1 kind of question marks at this point. You don't really know which way they're going to go, except for Dyson Daniels likely to be the starting point guard now for the Pelicans. You're going to have Dyson Daniels as the tallest guy on the floor. And they also drafted E.J. Liddell down in the second round out of Ohio State with the 41st overall pick, I believe it was. I like that move. They seem to be going big. They also got Larry Nance Jr. on this team. They're going big. I like the move here. They're doing exactly what Cleveland did. I think a lot of teams saw that Cleveland just went big and it worked perfectly. And I think a lot of teams are just going to follow suit right in there because size has been a factor in today's NBA. And if you can be big and you can still shoot the outside shot, you got a spot in the NBA.
Well, oh, you got more. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Well, before you go any further, basically, there's some other things I was gonna say about the draft that I said the other day, but I like what you just brought up with the size part of it too, because teams just saw what the Cavs did last year with three 7-footers in the starting lineup, and unfortunately, the NBA is a copycat league. There's gonna be a couple decades where it's gonna be big. We've seen it go small now. I think it's gonna go back to big. It's gonna go back to small. Over decades, it's just gonna keep teetering back and forth, and I think. Now teams see what the Cavs did, and they're thinking, how do we defend it? Well, they're going to think, we can't defend it, so let's just try to do what they did and bring in a bunch of size that play well together. It's all about fits and matchups. But I said on Monday, and I said yesterday when Matt was talking about the draft too as well, I thought the Pistons and the who was my second team? But the Pistons were one of my teams I thought did pretty well in the draft, and one of my favorite teams that performed well. But just looking back at the draft grades here, I like what the Kings did. If I probably would have taken Jaden Ivey at 4, but taking Keegan Murray there, I think that's a good pickup because you're in a spot where they pulled off that trade last year to get Sabonis, and they had to give up to Halliburton and Buddy Hield. So you bring another guy that can play somewhat in the backcourt with Keegan Murray. So I think that's a good pickup there for them. I think it's going to help them. But overall, I like what the Kings did. I like what the Pistons did. I'm trying to remember what the third team I said did well, but those are some of the teams I think did pretty well in this draft.
I also like the Spurs. They had 2 first-round picks.
Well, yeah.
And they went with Jeremy Sochan out of Baylor. Got some size there. Then they go with the 20th pick, take Malachi Branham out of Ohio State. Guaranteed scorer. He's going to fit in well behind Lonnie Walker. Spurs moving away now from DeJounte Murray. Big trade happened yesterday, sending DeJounte Murray over to Atlanta for 3 first-rounders and Danilo Gallinari. I don't mind it. Gallinari, I'm not sure exactly what
he's probably going to get waived.
He's going to fill here. Yeah, probably a good chance for a waive there, but
yeah,
especially with the 2 first-round picks, you don't really got a ton of room. Actually, 3 first-round picks, you don't really have a ton of room for bringing guys in. That's part of the reason they moved away from that. They also took Blake Wesley out of Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, I got to say, Spurs had a nice draft. Sochan, Branham, and Wesley. They brought in a lot of scoring, and you pair that now with Lonnie Walker and a couple of their other players they got going. I think they got a bright future, and Greg Popovich said he's down for another year. He liked coaching the young guys, so he's likely to stay and not retire just yet. So, all these young guys, they're going to get great experience with that head coach, and then they'll get to translate that into whoever steps up to replace Greg Popovich.
Yeah, I like what the Spurs did getting Branham too as well, because that was a guy that at least from our team, the Cavs, they were mock drafts were targeting him, trying to get. I didn't think he would fall to 14. Another guy I wanted was Johnny Davis, who wasn't going to fall to 14 there, so I'm happy with Abaji.
He went 10th to the Wizards, and I like that, especially with the look that Bradley Beal might be leaving Washington. You're not going to pretty much just have a young group over there in Washington with Hachimura and Avdia and now Johnny Davis. You got a lot of scoring and some pretty good defenders.
I think they're a team the last couple of years, even though they've had Bradley Beal and they've been still trying to do things. They've had some good draft picks, I think, and I think adding Johnny Davis is going to be good for that too. But I like the Pistons. I left out the other part I liked about it was I like getting Jaden Ivey, but I also like getting Jalen Duren from the Knicks too in that trade, because I think you're adding 2 really good guys. You're adding some size down front, which teams are going to start getting one size down front. And you compare Jaden Ivey with Cade Cunningham, that's going to be a pretty good duo going forward. I like what the Pistons did. I like what the Thunder did too, getting Holmgren and some other guys they got. I think there was a handful of teams that you could pick pretty much any team in the first round. I don't think there was really a team that had a bad draft.
No, I wouldn't say so. And I must say, I love Cavs' pick on Ochai Agbaji. We really do need a small forward. I mean, Okoro was good. He's there for defense. But when you have a guy like Agbaji available at this spot, you can't say no. He is such a high-level player, and to have him available at 14, you don't have to give up anything to get it. You take the best guy available, and that's exactly what they did. I imagine he's starting small forward day 1, maybe, depending on what goes on with the Okoro and obviously the Sexton situation. Because if Sexton's gone, it might force Okoro to play the 2. and or if LeVert is healthy, he'll play the 2, obviously. But if Sexton's gone, LeVert's still injured, that'll force a core down to the 2, put Agbaji at the 3. I don't hate that, but I like the scoring that they brought in, because if you're going to move on from Sexton, you have to find 20 points elsewhere. He's going to do that for you.
But the thing that questions me whether I think they're going to start or not, I personally, I think I would, because anybody that's listened to the show the last 2 times we've had shows, I'm going to sound repetitive here, but I'm going to say this because you're on. I love getting Agbaji because, and I said last week when you weren't on one of the shows last week, that I thought, if they keep the pick, he's one of the guys I wanted, because I don't know if they're going to trade it, try to get like a 5-6 year veteran, a young veteran in the league, which I wouldn't have got mad if they did that, but I'm happy with Agbaji because the guy just won a national championship. He's been in college for 4 years. If you look at his stats, like I said yesterday, he's scoring and 3-point percentage wise, he's improved every single year he's been in college. And I love 4-year college guys, 3-4 year college guys. That's experience. That means you could plug him in right away. So if they were to start him and wanted to start him day one, it wouldn't be, obviously he's got to learn the NBA style, but it wouldn't catch him off guard if he's starting. So I think that part of it's good, but I think, are they still going to want to start Lauri Markkanen at number 3 because they had success doing that last year? So are they going to try to move away from that? I don't know. To me, it worked, so keep riding with it. But a guy like Agbaji, he's got to get a lot of minutes because he's a 3-and-D guy. He's not a guy that's going to create his own shot, but he could come down on ball screens and shoot it, and obviously his defense too. So I love that part of it. But I told Matt yesterday, it's a good whether they keep Sexton or not, they're still deep, and I think it's a good problem to have. Whether you should start this guy or not, whether you should take Lauri Markkanen out, what do you do with LeVert? I think it's a good problem to have either way.
We'll get back to this in a second. We got some big news that just kind of came out here a little bit ago, right before the show. Mm-hmm. Actually, huge news. 2 of the biggest teams in college history are now planning to join the Big Ten as early as 2024. USC and UCLA are reportedly planning to join the Big Ten and leave the Pac-12, which would once again drop the Pac-12 down to 10 teams. I'm interested to see if the Pac-12 would rebrand after that or try and bring in a team like BYU and Boise from the Mountain West. Wouldn't hate that, actually. Bring in some of the Mountain West teams. But if this turns out to happen, Mike, not only would the Big Ten get huge football boosts, and this would really help USC and their football program, put Lincoln Riley into the Big Ten. Hell yes. Yeah. Probably force a realignment in terms of divisions. I'm all for that. And outside of that, well, now you just bring in 2 of the premier colleges in the country.
2 rivals as well.
2 rivals, so we're putting another rivalry in there. And we get basketball from USC and UCLA. Hell to the yes, I want that to happen. The only downside is the travel for that.
That's what I was going to say.
USC and UCLA, they got to go, halfway across the country every weekend. Or it sends one of our teams out there every weekend, which is the only downside I see to that is football teams and travel aren't always the best.
That's what I'm kind of looking at too. And when we're looking at other leagues too as well, we think, baseball, they should realign because there's teams that are going, you got certain leagues or divisions that are called West and teams have to go out East that aren't even in NFL. I mean, you got the Cowboys division. You got 3 teams up here and then the Cowboys are down south. So that part of it, I'm a little weird with that stuff. Like you said, traveling, it's a little bit of an issue, but bringing in these 2 schools is going to be awesome. But they're not really Big Ten, like fit the Big Ten mold because they're not the Midwest, but it's still going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, and I guess the one part of it, not fitting the Midwest. Well, we had Maryland and Rutgers back in 2014, I believe it was. We had Nebraska in 2011, and Penn State was added in the 90s. So, it did kind of feel like Big Ten's kind of in an expansion these last 10 years. They're looking to bring in competitive schools. USC and UCLA, while they haven't really – UCLA, I think, has been more competitive in football than USC has recently. But maybe the only downside is USC versus Ohio State not likely in a national championship ever again.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Bowl games or whatever.
Playoff, though, has been it does kill the Rose Bowl. Having USC versus Ohio State in a Rose Bowl, that's just – you want that matchup.
Yeah.
Not going to happen anymore. But, you're going to have teams now going from USC versus Rutgers, coast to coast on this matchup. I'd almost be interested to see if they made some more neutral site games for those two teams rather than true home and aways. If they did like back-to-back weeks going, against Indiana, Ohio State, and then maybe have a neutral site game in Indianapolis.
Or you could even see, like some teams doing the NFL. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, just even if you were to allow them to use one of those facilities as just their weekly training place, do all their drills while they're on the road, so you don't have to have them fly out every single week. You can keep them there, go 3 games on the road, 3 games at home type thing. It would make the schedules a little weirder, but if there's any conference is going to do it, I think it's the Big Ten, because they have shown time and time again they're not afraid to mix things up. I mean, I think you look ACC doesn't really change up much. SEC, they're bringing in 2 big schools. This is the Big Ten's answer right now, and I got to say, I mean, Texas and Oklahoma and USC and UCLA, those are 4 big names changing conferences here in the next 3 years. This is huge for football, basketball, baseball, and I know I'm giving a lot of conflicting thoughts here, but I'm excited by this move because I do think it's time for the Big Ten to beef up, because we brought in Rutgers, Maryland, and Nebraska were our last 3 teams. Nebraska looked like a great addition at the time. They were awesome in the Big 12, one of the top programs of all time. Move over to the Big Ten, had a couple good seasons. Now they've completely tanked down. Rutgers and Maryland, they were brought in for academics, money, and viewership. That's worked fine. They've been good in other sports. Fine. Football, yeah, they take a backseat to football. Both teams, though, they've been improving. I'd say in the Big Ten, little by little, they're catching up the competition. I mean, you brought Rutgers over from the Big East and Maryland from the ACC. I think Rutgers was Big East, then something, and then
they were Big East for basketball, so they were
Big East. They were slowly kind of moving out of the Big East because the Big East collapsed in football and dispersed into the American.
Which I wish never happened, because it used to be sweet with Pitt and other teams that were in it. That was sick.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good conference, but it did feel like time, though. Big Ten, they need another team, especially if they don't go for a realignment here. These 2 teams, they need to go into the Big Ten West, because the Big Ten East, there's 3-4 big teams that are going to compete. And right now, the West has nothing. And having a move like USC and UCLA, you put them in the Big Ten West and maybe shuffle a few teams around. Not all of them, but if you move a little bit, especially for, divisional travel, keep it in division, make that travel a little less, keep it those Western teams. I think the Big Ten could really open this thing up and potentially become the second conference to get 2 teams in the playoff. I mean, you could look very easily. Ohio State and USC and Alabama and Georgia are your 4 teams in the national or in the playoffs.
Well, a couple things.
I don't think that's too out there. I mean, if USC comes in, they have Lincoln Riley, a coach that has been in the playoffs. He's got great recruiting. The recruits are coming up. If they go great on the West, Big Ten goes great on the Ohio State goes big on the East, or Penn State, and they meet in the Big Ten championship game, and it's close, and they were both undefeated going into that. Hell yeah, that's a one-way ticket to the semifinal, and I don't think that's too hard, because I think USC, especially with the addition of Lincoln Riley and all the guys he's been bringing in recently, very easily I think can compete and get a top 3-4 spot in the Big Ten West.
Well, a couple things came to my mind. I'm probably gonna forget some while I'm talking, but one thing number one, you're going to have these teams in the West, because if you're looking at the east side of the Big Ten, you have Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, who's hit here or there. So, and most of the time they're pretty competitive. So that alone has just been competitive the last couple of years. That's probably one of the better competition-wise divisions in college football. So they're going to have to be in the West. Number 2, what does this do for recruiting as well? Because these teams are going to be on the other side of the country, on the West Coast, and most schools. You have schools like Ohio State and Alabama and some other schools that do recruit throughout the country. But the bulk of them, especially in the Big Ten and some other conferences as well, most of Penn State's recruits are Pennsylvania people. Most of Michigan's recruits are Michigan people. So other than like those schools I mentioned, are they going to start recruiting into this side of the country as well? I think that's another thing to look at too. But I forget what my third point was. I'd had some things come around when you were talking about. I can't
Well,
remember.
Mike,
But those are two
I
main
do
things.
like the recruiting aspect of this because, Ohio State kind of the one team that has the big footing over there in California, Texas, and Florida.
Yeah.
Now USC brings that in. Obviously, UCLA is going to get the California recruits. And if anything, this could bring about a change of play for the Big Ten because Ohio State has been the team that sets the tone, changes the speed up. What Ohio State does, the Big Ten has to follow. And now another team coming out of here in the Pac-12, a conference that I think has kind of been falling apart in recent years. And, in football, I wouldn't be surprised if they do make some big moves, and that comes with USC and UCLA, which would be huge hits to the Pac-12 right now. I mean, those are their premier programs. Outside of that, it's Oregon.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to have at this point. But I think you bring in USC and UCLA, two teams that aren't afraid to play different styles than the rest of their conference or, set the tone and bring new guys in. I do think that this one brings those programs back to relevance if they join the Big Ten. And having USC there and the way that they've always challenged Ohio State, I think it finally opens the door, especially if they get put in a scenario where though they can face off in a Big Ten championship game, put them in opposite divisions and let them go at it. One, viewership of that. Can you imagine a Big Ten championship, USC versus Ohio State? That's a national championship game.
Yeah.
That's going to be the highest viewed Big Ten championship in history.
Yeah, actually, we've had some bad ones the last couple of years, but I think you're in a spot though with UC. You're going to see if USC.
And I think UCLA probably in a better position right now than USC as well. I mean, they've shown off a little bit better recently.
Probably. I mean, both have been pretty minimal, but at least looking the last couple of years, UCLA is probably more competitive. I think they were last year as well, but I think with USC getting Lincoln Riley, I think you're gonna see, because it's no secret, we all know Ohio State's the biggest brand in the Big Ten. It's no secret, and one of the best in college football. And I think it's gonna be fun to see two teams in the same conference who are gonna, if anybody can beat them. But I'm just saying they're gonna be aiming towards playing each other, like you said, in the Big Ten championship. You're gonna see that part of it. You're gonna see them, trying to beat each other in recruiting, because Lincoln Riley can recruit all over the country, and so can Ohio State. They always have. So they're gonna be fighting each other for recruits. They're gonna be fighting each other to meet in the Big Ten championship. They're gonna be fighting each other for all this other stuff. That's gonna bring about a big competition on all levels with that. And not ignoring all the other teams too.
Other Big Ten teams as well, but none of them have really ever been able to compete with Ohio State recruiting wise. I mean, you look at Michigan, they finally beat Ohio State for the first time in 10 years. You think this would be the spot they finally get some momentum. But currently, with just 1 year to go, they only have 4 recruits right now for the class of 2023. 1 4-star and 3 3-stars. They had another 4, but he decommitted. They lost legacy player in Carr to Notre Dame, their rival. And they're currently ranked 44th in the nation in recruiting class. And that's going to go up. But that really is the second best recruiting program in the Big Ten. And they're not even close to Ohio State, who just took over at number 1 in the nation over Notre Dame and Texas for the class of 2023. And Brian Hartline currently leads all recruiters in the nation.
Yeah. And I'm
yet again. I'm just going to put this out there. Brian Hartline is the best football recruiter in the nation.
Oh, I don't think it's not really an argument.
What other position coach is getting recruits like him? Every single year, he's getting 1, if not 2 or 3 top 5 wide receivers.
Yeah, it's become, they've been up there with Alabama, and they probably have overtaken them. But it's teams in the Big Ten that like you said, Michigan struggled with it the last couple years. That's a big reason why they haven't been able to beat Ohio State up till this year, because they can't recruit that well. And I think Michigan State, they're hit or miss. You're not getting any huge guys to go there. You're getting some good guys, but
I mean, the best player they've had in the last 5 years, they brought in from the transfer portal.
Yeah, and what I'm not going to shy away from it, because I'd say this even if they weren't my team. But what's the main reason I stuck up for James Franklin? Because I think he's a good recruiter. He's not Ohio State. He's not Ryan Day. He's not Hartline type of recruiter. But if you're looking at Big Ten, he's next best, I think, at least in his career. Since he taken over in 2014, he hasn't gotten the huge wins, but at least he's getting guys to think, oh, these guys are going there. If you're a high school kid, these guys are going there. I should look at this place or try to go there. So I think it's gonna, like I said, bringing these two teams.
There's out there. Notre Dame did just overtake Ohio State yet again. It's been back and forth.
Yeah, it teeters back and forth all this time of year, especially. But
In Penn State, number 5 class, by the way. Right
Yeah,
now.
And that's where they've stayed pretty much.
That's why they can't compete with Ohio State, because they bring in top recruits.
Yeah.
And that's why when you see, even when Penn State has a bad season, it's not always a blowout against Ohio State. You know, they don't get run over because they do actually have similarly, ranked prospects. Their guys can compete at that level. It's just, I think some of the assistants around James Franklin don't develop as well. And I mean, you've seen only a couple of programs in the nation show development at a high level: Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. Yeah. In recent years, maybe Oklahoma too to throw in there. They've had some down year here and there. But I think all in all, those are your 5 programs right now that have been developing players. And I think that's the one thing that separates anybody else in the Big Ten. And putting Lincoln Riley in there now in the Big Ten potentially, that opens the door now. Now the Big Ten has 2 guys that can develop at a high level. Then you're going to have Jim Harbaugh and James Franklin as well. You got Mel Tucker at Michigan State, who's putting a name together. And, of course, Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. The dude is going to put out tight ends like it's nobody's business. Wisconsin is going to continue to put out offensive linemen and defensive linemen every single year, probably a few good linebackers too. And putting USC and UCLA out there, I think huge for the Big Ten.
And just another coach came to my mind. What's Minnesota's coach again? I can't remember his name.
PJ Fleck.
Yeah, Fleck. Yeah, I forgot when you were listing coaches. I was going to throw him in there too because I think he.
And by the way, UCLA is coming off a season. They went 8-4. Their only losses were by 3 to number 10 Oregon. They beat a top 25 LSU, who we found out was bad. They did lose to Fresno State, but Fresno had a hell of a year.
They did.
They lost big to Arizona State, and they lost big to Utah.
They had a good start to the year.
But they won their last 3 games of the year, and then they did not play in a bowl game.
They had a good start, and they had a good finish, but they didn't play pretty well in the middle of their schedule.
They struggled.
Yeah,
Which totally fits the Big Ten mold.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, you see a lot of teams do that, but I think that's another good Maryland
every year out of conference, undefeated. Hit the Big Ten, 1 win.
Well, in their defense, they don't really schedule too hard.
Top 25 after week 4 every year,
and they don't really schedule that tough out of Big Ten, anyways.
Well, they've been better though when it comes to that, and they still find some pretty good ways to win, and then they just go and play the Big Ten, and it's just they fall off. But looking at this though, with these 2 teams coming over as soon as 2024, that's what they're saying. I think this is going to be the conference, at least in college football, that I think they have the best head coach group in college football. Like you just ran through them all. Lincoln Riley, you're going to have him. You're going to have Ryan Day. You're going to have James Franklin, who all these schools like LSU and all these schools are trying to throw money at him, so he's a big name. You got, like you said, Jim Harbaugh, whatever you want to say about him. All these guys, I think it's going to be a good coaching group. And I think the last thing that came to my mind that I forgot, but it just came back to my head, that, 2 years ago, or whatever it was, 2 years ago, when they were, delaying the season with COVID and everything, and a lot of people were getting mad saying, this league's starting, this league's playing, they're starting too late. And I remember people like Kirk Herbstreit saying, maybe you're going to see leagues kind of branch off on their own and kind of form their own alliance. I think that's kind of what you're seeing here. It's just kind of a start of it. Yeah, that Northern Alliance that I think we kind of talked about this, especially this last couple of seasons, bringing the Pac-12, Big Ten, ACC together for those interconference games. They have USC and UCLA just go, forget that. We'll just join them. You're going to have – I think we're going to get to the point here in the next 20 years. I don't think players are going to like – or people are going to like it very much, but we're going to have 2 super conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten.
That's what I think.
That's what this is turning into. ACC has 1 good team. Big 12 now has no good teams. Pac-12 has Oregon and Utah. It's going to come down to the Big Ten, SEC. That's just how it's going to be. You're going to have your special teams here and there making their big runs, one-and-done years. And with the Big 12 now opening up, it opens the door for Oklahoma State to potentially take over, or Baylor. But at the end of the day, those teams aren't going to compete with the highest levels of the Big Ten and the SEC. So I think we're going to be moving into super conferences in the next 20, 30 years, which I know sounds like a long time, but it takes a while for things like this to happen and that development to finally finish off. And I mean, you've seen the start of it. Oklahoma and Texas, 2 premier Big 12 teams that have Big 12 written all over them. They represent the Big 12 left.
Yeah.
Just as Texas A&M did a couple of years ago to the SEC. And now the 2 biggest names in the Pac-12 in USC and UCLA going, adios.
Yeah, I think these
It's
these
huge.
these
And
bigger
by the way,
schools. Go ahead.
with other coach in the Big Ten, Scott Frost, I know he hasn't lived up to the hype, but at the end of the day, he isn't a bad coach. I mean, they had the number 2 offense in the Big Ten, but had the worst defense. He's a great offense coach. He needs some help defensively. We still need to figure out, Brent Berlema in Illinois. He went 5-7 in 1 year.
Yeah.
I gotta say that's fine by me. Mike Locksley, they went 7-6 last year. They've had a winning season under his tenure in 4 years. He's 13-23 overall, but they've shown some improvement having Towley as the coach. Tom Allen at Indiana, overall he's 26-32.
He's done better the last couple of years.
Yeah, and Indiana's been kind of up and up. I mean, they're still a 500 team, and I think they were the worst in the Big Ten this last year, but they're not a terrible team. Jeff Brom at Purdue is 28-29 in 5 years. He's had 2 winning seasons and also has, I think, not a Big Ten championship appearance, but he's been up there in the race for the Big Ten West. Greg Schiano at Rutgers is bringing that program up. He's 76-81 in his 13 years overall there, and they went 9-3 in 2020 in the Big Ten. Mel Tucker at Michigan State. We talked about Fleck, James Franklin, Pat Fitzgerald. Hello. Yeah. That's the name you forget every single time. And he's had 10-3 seasons. He's 109-90 overall in 16 years at Northwestern, which is kind of crazy to think.
And did you get Iowa's coach too?
What?
Did you get Iowa's coach too? I forget his name as well.
Yeah, I'm actually going down a list. This is ranking the best coaches in the Big Ten. It has it actually had James Franklin behind Pat Fitzgerald, which I don't know if I agree with on that list.
Yeah,
I feel like James Franklin more consistent. Pat Fitzgerald he's a roller coaster. He may have higher peaks, but he has much lower lows.
Yeah.
Paul Chryst, we talked about. Okay, this is where this list is a little out there. Has Ryan Day as the 3rd best coach in the Big Ten. 34-4 overall in 3 years. Number 2 is Jim Harbaugh, which is interesting because this is the WolverinesWire.USA today. They don't even have their own coach as number 1. Find that interesting. But I also think it's just, you look at 7 years in Michigan, 24 losses. Highest finish was number 3 in those 7 years. Only has 1 win over his rival. And then you look at Ryan Day on the other side, the coach they have behind him, in 3 years, only has 4 losses. It has
maybe they're getting every year. Maybe they're throwing in the length of their 10 years. I don't know. I don't agree with that.
That's definitely a part of it because the number 1 coach they have in the Big Ten, I think if you go back 10 years ago, it's true, but Kirk Ferentz is the number 1 coach in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
But I know they had a good season last year. They were in the Big Ten championship. They got run over, and the Big Ten West has been awful the last, 6 years? I think the Big Ten West has been bad since Ohio State beat Wisconsin 59-0.
I think it has been, and Wisconsin usually is their best team. If you want to look at that, but they're really not that great. It's just that I think it's pretty weak, and that's why again, adding these 2 teams it makes sense because of travel, but that should strengthen that side of the conference up. I think.
Yeah, I think even if you don't do any realignment, I think there needs to be some just maybe balance things out a little bit, but not a ton.
And another thing that came to my mind, another thing too, is you often hear with Pac-12 teams, especially these 2, that the last couple of years, I know they've been playing well, but the last couple of years their fan support hasn't been that great. So coming to the Big Ten, bringing some other teams going out there, like if Ohio State has to go out there, Penn State or Michigan State has to go out there, is that going to bring more fans in to see these teams that they normally don't see? So I think from a revenue standpoint and fan viewership standpoint, that should be able to help them. But I guess it's just we'll have to wait and see with that part of it.
Yeah, definitely. And here's another number to put along with this. All-time best winning percentages in the nation. We have 2 teams tied for number 1, Alabama and Ohio State, 2 best winning percentages. Number 3 is Notre Dame. 4 is Michigan. Number 5, Oklahoma. Number 6 is Texas. Both those teams are going into the SEC. Number 7 is USC, who will be joining the Big Ten. Penn State is number 8. Nebraska is number 9. And Tennessee is number 10. You're now looking here in the next year or next 4 years, if this happens, that all but 1 team is going to be all but 1 of the top 10 teams in college football history are going to be in 2 conferences.
Yeah.
And
crazy.
Notre Dame, I think if there's a time to talk about Notre Dame joining a conference, it's probably in the next, before we hit 2030. I would say Notre Dame it needs to join a conference. And I think they've realized that slowly. And it looks like they're leaning towards the ACC. But when you're kind of seeing these super conferences start to emerge, I think a premier program like Notre Dame, I don't know if they're going to waste their time with the ACC.
I wouldn't.
That's my only thing. You look at the ACC, and who are they really going to compete against? Clemson? I mean, they're going to have one good opponent. Wake Forest, they've been better, but they're not anywhere near consistent when it comes to having good consecutive seasons. NC State's an up and down team over there, and obviously Clemson is the premier program. But is Notre Dame really going to be a team that, if they're going to join a conference, are they really going to just join one just for the sake of doing it? Or are they going to look to see what conference is going to make us look the best? And maybe that's the ACC just because they'll be at the top. Because, I mean, if you see the Notre Dame joining the Big Ten, which one? They're going to get all their rivals if they do that. I mean, they're going to have matchups against Michigan State, Ohio State, everything in there, even USC to an extent. They're going to get some big rivals out of that. But, I just – Notre Dame joining a conference thing may be the biggest question mark in college football. Who do they go to? Because you join the Big Ten, they probably don't win the Big Ten. You join the ACC, they probably win the ACC. Or now we're seeing just doesn't matter where you are, USC, UCLA, go to the Big Ten, sure. Perhaps Notre Dame just goes, oh, hey, look, there's an opening out west. I'll take the Pac-12.
I think
the American's been a great conference.
It has been. I know.
And all they need is one premier name to put them up there. I know the loss of Cincinnati is going to hurt a lot because that's their program right now. But Notre Dame could just go, I'll take that one.
Yeah.
I think Notre Dame's got a great chance right now to go pretty much wherever they want.
They control wherever they want to go pretty much.
The Big 12 needs help. The Pac-12 will need help. The ACC needs help. Or they could just go Big Ten or SEC.
And form that super conference we've been talking about. But I think, the thing about them going to the ACC, and I've been saying this for the last couple of years, like you said, other than Clemson, like who are they going to have that's going to boost their resume up? Because I think playing as an independent, they haven't scheduled great teams, but they schedule against solid teams that if they win those games, people look at them like, hey, we can put them up here because they have one great win and they have some solid wins against some other teams. I don't know if they're going to have that in the ACC because there's some solid teams, like you said, other than Clemson, maybe NC State. I know Pitt just redid themselves last year. That they're back into something. I don't know if that'll continue, but we'll see. So I don't know if that's going to help them out too much going to the ACC. But like you said, they pretty much control wherever they want to go. If they want to go there, if they want to be a team that's going to change things up and try to go to the American or just form this big thing in the Big Ten or SEC, I think it's going to be fun to see because everybody's last couple years been saying they should join a conference. I think we all know they should. And we got to see it in that COVID year with them in the ACC, but they can go wherever they want pretty much.
And I guess the only question left out of the Pac-12 now, does Oregon look to leave?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, who are they going to have left to compete against?
Pretty much just them in Utah.
This move potentially could completely break the Pac-12. I mean, I know, you know what? I won't say that because they've played with 8 teams. They were the Pac-8 long before they were the Pac-12. But I think you're in such a modern day of football, you need big conferences with lots of names. You can't get by on name alone these days.
Yeah, and I think, other than if it stays that way, it's Oregon and pretty much Utah. That's pretty much it.
Oregon, Utah, yeah. I mean, I don't see anyone else out there in the Pac-12 that really does anything.
I mean, Arizona State's been trying, but they haven't done anything. They've been trying to with Herm Edwards, but they haven't gotten able to any traction there. So this could be the end of the Big 12. I really think that because you're losing all your USC, UCLA, and who was the third one?
Sorry, what?
Who are the 2 teams going to SEC? Texas, and who's the other one?
Oklahoma.
Oh, they're Big 12. But anyway, you're losing your top 2 with USC and UCLA. That's a big hit for a conference that, like you see the Pac-12 Conference Championship the last couple years, nobody watches it. Nobody even goes to it. So I think that alone, now you're losing your 2 big brands. That's a huge hit to that conference.
It does, and perhaps this also opens the door for the ACC. I mean, bringing in Notre Dame would be huge for them. If they want to maintain a relevant conference over here, they need to probably branch out of the coast, and maybe just reach down into Florida a little bit more. I mean, even if you could steal Miami out of the, or not, they already have Miami. Not, I mean, if you could steal Florida out of the SEC, which I don't think is that big of, question mark. Florida hasn't been in a spot to compete in the SEC, and now bringing in two other big powerhouses. I know Florida probably would want to stay just tradition-wise, and the SEC loves their tradition, but I think there's a chance you potentially can flip Florida over, create Florida State in-state rivalry there, and get that going. But also the ACC, I mean, Clemson, Florida State, UNC, and NC State, all four teams could make moves if they wanted. Clemson, they can go anywhere they want if they were to make a change. I don't think they would because you're the top school in a conference. You're not changing that up. Clemson is the only one that's probably not moving. I know Oklahoma was number one of the Big 12, and they still moved. But I feel like Clemson's a little bit more set in their ways up here in the ACC. That's their region. They don't have a lot of travel, and they play well.
And they've been winning national championships out of it, too.
Right. And they're getting national championships. They're winning. So I don't think Clemson is a team that makes the move. I do see, though, UNC or NC State potentially the move. Florida State, I think, very easily could just go, oh, yeah, we're making the changeover to anyone else, over to the SEC. I don't see it from Clemson as much, though.
I agree. I don't think there's a reason for them to. Like you said, if they've been benefiting from it the last couple years, whether we think it's weak or not. They're still getting to the playoffs and competing with top teams, so it's not like it's hurting them. So I don't see them doing anything.
Yeah, and I'm actually looking at some lists here. Potential teams to join into the Pac-12: Boise State, South Dakota, or San Diego State. Pardon me, which I think both good additions if they can get those in there.
I like Boise a lot. They've been in bowl games too and competed against higher.
I wouldn't mind if they even brought in 3, made it the Pac-13, bringing BYU along with them because BYU's been competitive.
They have been. The teams like those two have gotten in bowl games and competed with, maybe not win them, but they've held their own against Power 5 teams, especially Boise State the last couple of years. We saw them at 1 year against maybe Oklahoma State, I think it was, but they can battle with some of these teams.
This came from Pete Thamel on Twitter, college football senior writer for ESPN. He spoke to a few sources who called USC and UCLA's move to a Big Ten a formality with a press conference expected in the next day. So this is essentially done according to sources at ESPN.
And this is pretty – I'll tell you what, this came out I saw this right before we came on the show.
It was on 135. I saw the 11 Warriors report from which is an Ohio State site, put that out there, and I went, oh, well, there we go.
Well, I figured we were going to bring it up at some point, but I was going to try to get you caught up on the draft and stuff. But I saw
the draft and stuff. This is now.
How often
do we actually get breaking news on this show? It always happens in the next hour after the show. We'll close it off, and then something happens.
Well, when I saw it, I was like, you know what, as soon as 2024 too, that shows this has been in the works. We just haven't really heard too much about it.
Well, apparently they were looking and they have been researching the last couple of years on potentially moving. Now they found one. Boom, let's go now. We're not going to wait around.
Yeah, came right out of nowhere.
2024 is when all this is going to take place. I mean, that's when you're going to see the move for the Big 12, bringing in new teams and sending out Oklahoma and Texas. So that's the year to do it. I think that's where everyone's jumping on. And that means the 2024-2025 season is going to be a wild one, which means these next 2 years could be the finale of this era of football.
Hey, and you know what? People
live it up.
People like the parody the last couple years, especially in this playoff era, all the parody and all the drama. It's going to get even more next level with that stuff, with these teams playing each other all year. And another thing, too, are we going to see, if it gets to a point where we just see 2 super conferences, what's that going to do for the schedule? How many more games is that going to add? Is it going to be like an NFL type schedule? That's another thing to think about.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that can come out of this, and right now I'm pretty much just going through Twitter, seeing what else is going on out here, and those are the biggest storylines. And I guess we'll take a step off that. And with NBA free agency starting today, how about we get a little bit of that done here?
Yeah, let's do it because I don't know too much
what's going on. We haven't really gotten to it. So, best free agents available, Bradley Beal is number one. He's likely to re-sign with the Wizards, potentially on a huge deal. But with the Wizards picks, I wouldn't be overly surprised if they tried to move away from him, because with Beal, they haven't really won. Even when he's played his very best, they still haven't won. And I think the only reason they keep them is because they don't have another big name star.
That part of it too, I agree with. But if it's me, I'm pretty big on I want people to stay where they're at. But I think Bradley Beal, if he's able to come back there, I think I like we talked about. I like getting Johnny Davis. I like some of the younger guys who had another year of development this year with Hachimura and Denny Avdia. It hasn't worked so far, but if they can get him, maybe pick up another cheap free agent somewhere, I think the Wizards are a team that can not make noise, but at least be more competitive than they have been. Because we talked about, I think me and Matt did when we were talking about the draft the other day, that the Wizards started out pretty good last year. They started out pretty much the pace the Cavs did, but they just fell off. And I think it's a lot of it's because Bradley Beal has injury problems. But if he could come back and stay healthy and young guys they got, what does that do for him? And what does that do for the Wizards?
Mm-hmm. Number 2 on the free agent available, Zach LaVine. Mm-hmm. There were rumors around the 14th of the month that he was planning to re-sign, considering the fact that it hasn't happened in 2 weeks, not looking good. And Chicago, they got DeMozen, they got DeRozan, they got Lonzo, they got Vucevic, they got Caruso. They're bringing in some young guys from the draft. He's not a huge lock to get re-signed, and don't really know if they need him. He was 24 in 4-4 and went 48% shooting, and they got to the playoffs. But if the fact that the deal hasn't gotten done by now, I don't think it's likely to get done.
Yeah, and I think you're looking at a Bulls team where, obviously you want to keep them, but it's like last year they brought in a bunch of free agents. I was kind of thinking last year when they bring in a bunch of these guys, like, hey, they got a problem here. They got a crowded backcourt, pardon. They had a lot of guys. So I don't want to say they don't need them, but it's going to be kind of hard for him to say, hey, I want to stay here when you already have these other guys that can fill my role if I leave.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. Number 3 on the list, and this is one I haven't been able to wrap my head around. DeAndre Ayton.
I can't either.
He'll be a restricted free agent, but the Suns have pretty much said we're done with Ayton.
Why?
He's still 23 years old. They were the number 1 team in basketball.
They picked him number 1 overall.
17 and 10 a game with 63% shooting.
Yeah,
and he's been a huge piece of this team's success. This is one that baffles my mind why this is happening.
And who they, the thing is, if they lose him, trade him, whatever they want to do, sign and trade type thing, who are they going to bring in that's going to start right there? Because they drafted this guy number 1. He was just on a team that went to the NBA Finals last year. He was on a team this year that was one of the best teams in the league. Like, what's the problem here? I've seen this too, and I was waiting for us to talk about it on the show. I really don't understand too much about it, to be honest. This came out of nowhere. It's unexpected.
Also, Chicago may now be shopping Kobe White as well. So, I mean, if they were to bring back LaVine, I think that's a good shot that they move on from Kobe White then. I think they probably keep one, get rid of the other. Lakers right now do seem to be the front runner. Appears Chicago wants a young player and a pick back for Kobe White. So, not exactly what the Lakers have to offer, but still.
They don't have young guys at all.
No. Number 4 one on this list, not likely to get signed thanks to recent events, but Miles Bridges is a restricted free agent. Charlotte was talking about bringing him back, but considering the fact he was arrested yesterday for a domestic violence incident,
yeah, I was going to say that, yeah. So
not likely to see movement here in free agency. And obviously it'll depend on what the NBA does. They could put him in on exempt list, and obviously the police have first go at this, so don't know what's going on there. 100% we'll hear more in the next week or so, I'm sure. James Harden, though, has opted out of his player option, but he will look to re-sign with Philadelphia, so he is out there. And, teams probably will be picking up the phone to call, but he has promised to re-sign with Philadelphia. Whether that happens or not, still some question marks. Jalen Brunson, though, probably the youngest rising star, potentially looking to get paid. Right now, the Knicks are looking to take him for a big contract over there, and I think that's a great addition to put on the Knicks. They've really been putting something together, and if Julius Randle can put up 25 points again and Jalen Brunson comes in and gives them 20, that's almost half your team scoring from 2 guys. So they got enough at that point to go around and continue to move stuff. Next guy on this list, Colin Sexton. I mean, no one knows what's going on with Colin Sexton right now. He'll be a restricted free agent, so Cleveland can match any option. But there were teams wanting him this past February before the NBA trade deadline, and it still hurts that we'd lose Sexton. I like him on the team.
It would hurt a lot, and you know, I'm one of the guys. I like to stay true to who you start things with, and I've said this several times. He's the guy that really started this culture and rebuild that Kobe Altman wanted to put in place, and he is that culture. That's his personality, and I still think they can try to keep him, but it doesn't. It looks pretty split in half, 50-50 right now. I mean, I feel bad for him because if he doesn't get hurt last year, they don't get LeVert. He's probably back with no problem. But
here we go. Woj bomb as of a minute ago.
What do you got?
Kevin Durant has requested a trade from the New York Knicks, from the Brooklyn Nets.
Oh, wow.
There we are.
What's that do for Kyrie now?
Done.
What's Kyrie going to do now?
Oh, he's gone. I think it's all but a formality at this point. With Durant wanting out, no chance Kyrie stays. Harden's gone. Blake Griffin is now looking to move back to L.A. They don't have anything now. But that is huge.
So where does Kevin Durant want to go? That's the thing.
All we got right now is Kevin Durant has requested a trade.
Portland, maybe?
That's all we got right now.
We saw Damian Lillard the other day put that Photoshop picture of him and Kevin Durant. I'd love to see him in Portland, but I don't know if they could have what it takes to get it done.
Yeah, well, Anthony Simmons, potentially he's going to be a restricted free agent. If they could go for a sign-and-trade move over there. I mean, he is coming off a knee injury, but if he checks out, he's a young guy, averaged 17 points per game last year, and he could be a big guy. And if they could do a sign-and-trade potentially over to Brooklyn, I don't think they would hate that. Probably have to send a couple first-round picks to get KD as well, but that would put Portland in the door. And they're also going to be losing their big guy, Yusuf Nurkic. He's an unrestricted free agent coming up later today. I believe free agency starts at 3:00 today. So
somewhere it's afternoon.
Something's going to happen. It's going to happen here soon.
Again, right after we get off the show, too.
Right. I'm just going to text DJ, hey, can we get a couple more minutes to see what happens? And here we go. We got Nets have just acquired Jazz's Royce O'Neal in a trade for a 2023 first-round pick. So we're ending the show, and stuff is starting, Mike.
Hey, you know what, though? If you're a Nets fan,
we're going to have a lot to talk about tomorrow, I have a feeling.
Yeah, well, yeah, and with the Nets, I'll end on this part, at least for today. You had a part last year where you just had Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. You're about to lose all three of them. And if they lose all three of these guys, where does this rebuild really start? We'll have to see what they get for returns for Kevin Durant or what happens with Kyrie. But they hardly have any draft picks over the next couple of years, so they can't really go young.
They gave up everything to put.
They gave up everything for this.
And I mean, they brought in a 29-year-old point guard out of Utah, who this past season averaged 7 points per game, and they gave up. Wait, they just gave up a first-round pick for that.
All I gotta say is thank you, Brooklyn, for giving us Jared Allen, and then we end up getting Karis LeVert. They screwed themselves. They went all in, and it didn't even work. They won one playoff series.
And the Nets just gave up another first-round pick.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are you doing?
Yeah, I don't know. But Marvin Bagley, he's gonna be a big availability. He doesn't like being in Detroit. I don't know. He could potentially make some noise. 15 point per game guy, 7 rebounds, 56% shooting. Detroit probably have a chance to re-sign him, but I don't know. He kind of feels like a guy that just hasn't found his spot yet in the league. John Wall, he's going to be available this year, and I don't think it's likely that Houston's going to pick him back up. They don't need him. He's not really what they're looking for. And it appears that the Clippers, I don't think they've signed him yet because free agency hasn't started, but he's likely to go to the Los Angeles Clippers.
Yeah, we'll see with that. But there's a lot of intriguing, not top of the line guys like we've seen in past years, but I think this is an intriguing free agency with some of these guys that are all stars with Zach LaVine and some of these other guys top the list. I think it's going to be fun to see how many guys request trades too as well. We always see that the last couple of years that we think this guy's going here and then another star, my team's not getting him. I want to get traded somewhere else. So it's going to be fun.
NBA yeah, definitely. And, there's going to be a couple other guys, too, some, under the radar guys that are going to get picked up after our initial stars are gone. Gary Harris from Orlando Magic. He went, back in 2017, 2018. He was averaging 18 points a game, and he could potentially be open. Tyus Jones out of Memphis, if he doesn't get re-signed. I mean, he's he's a pretty solid point guard. He was backing up Ja pretty well out there. Gary Payton Jr. will be available. Victor Oladipo is on the board. Malik Monk is on the board. Mitchell Robinson out of New York. Mo Bamba's contract has not been picked up by the Orlando Magic, so they will be moving on from him, and he's now being touted as a bust after a couple of years.
He was picked top 5, right?
Back in the 2018 draft.
Yeah.
I mean, considering the guys picked around him were Luka and Trae Young, yeah, probably a little bit of a bust. He's been getting better. He's still only 24 years old, 4 years away from his prime. I don't want to call him a bust yet, but I think he just needs a better spot. Orlando's just a terrible place to play basketball. I mean, you saw Vucevic out there dominant for years. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
Thomas Bryant, a good center from the Washington Wizards. He's one of the top young guys out there, and 24 years old. He's had a couple of injuries, but 12 points per game, 6.7 rebounds over the last couple of years. Patty Mills from the Nets. He's also a free agent this year, so they really do have nothing.
Yeah.
And, here's your entire list of point guards in free agency: DeLon Wright, Goran Dragic, Ricky Rubio, Aaron Holiday, Kemba Walker, Austin Rivers, Schroeder, Javon Carter, Nida Lakina, Rajon Rondo, Michael Carter-Williams, and Facundo Campazzo. Shooting guards: Dante DiVincenzo. His contract was not picked up. Bruce Brown out of the Nets. Bryn Forbes from Denver. Tony Snell, Lonnie Walker. He's a restricted free agent. Damian Lee, Lance Stevenson, Wesley Matthews, Rodney Hood, Jeremy Lamb, and Lou Will at small forward. This is one of the bigger lists. Trevor Ariza, Deshaun Tate, Otto Porter Jr., Kyle Anderson, Andre Iguodala, Joe Ingles, Cody Martin, Kevin Knox, T.J. Warren, Daniel House, Caleb Martin, Rudy Gay, Amir Coffey, Troy Brown, Derek Jones Jr., Juan Toscano Anderson, Josh Okogie, and Kent Bazemore at the power forward. Thaddeus Young, Nemanja Bjelica, Paul Millsap, Blake Griffin, Bobby Portis, Chris Boucher, Nick Batum, PJ Tucker, Carmelo Anthony, Markieff Morris, Taj Gibson, James Johnson. At the center spot is Cody Zeller, Dwight Howard, Kevon Looney, JaVale McGee, Gorgie Dang, Montrezl Harrell, Dwayne Dedman, Isaiah Hartenstein, Robin Lopez, DeMarcus Cousins, Serge Ibaka, Aaron Baines, Nick Claxton, Andre Drummond, and Hassan Whiteside. So some really big names are going to be in the mix here in this next couple of days as we're waiting on what the last Woj bombs of our show is going to be. Hey, Mike, we finally got some big ones.
Well, hey, I want to get this in before we get off. Woj is still. It's the same story, but he's going further in the Durant news. He says as the Nets prepare to move on from the most valuable trade asset ever, which he is. The Nets they're making their whole roster pretty much available. That's what he's saying here. So they're going to strip everything down.
I just saw that as well, and I think that's an interesting, interesting and obvious move.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's so weird they just brought in Royce O'Neal for a first-round pick, because when your star is requesting a trade like that,
you got to keep all the assets you have.
I wouldn't have given up a first-round pick, because they could find themselves in the same spot that the Oklahoma City Thunder are in when they just have 20 first-round picks in the next 4 years. And you can pretty much pick and choose whatever you want at this point, but Kevin Durant is going to be one of the biggest trade pieces I think we'll ever see here in the NBA, and only because LeBron James has never been traded.
Yeah.
Or Michael Jordan. You don't see a player of this caliber get traded like this.
No. It's gonna be weird. See what happens.
It's gonna be weird, and I wish we had more time just to sit here and wait. So it'll be an interesting show tomorrow and the rest of the week. Free agency underway. We didn't get to any baseball, but it's baseball. It's going to be going on for the next couple months. We'll get there. But I've been Alec Caverna. That's Mike Wolfgang. Full crew back tomorrow? Maybe. I think so. Potentially. We'll find out. We'll see you then. Bye.